Hello, fellow adventurer. What magical corner of the globe are you watching from today? A tiny town? A giant city? Let me know below, and please share this video if you want to make the algorithm smile. Let's roll. Margot gently set aside her mug of cocoa, its steam still curling upward, and eased herself to her feet. These days, her body moved with careful deliberation, a constant reminder of time's quiet insistence. To counter the stiffness, she developed a habit of adding a slight spring to her steps, almost playful, almost performative. It was one of many little illusions she used to keep age at bay, if only for a moment, until truth inevitably caught up. The past few months had not been kind to her. Worries seemed to multiply faster than she could handle them, yet this particular evening wasn't about her troubles. Someone else needed her focus, her calm. Through the frosted glass of the front door, two indistinct figures waited patiently. Drawing in a breath, she summoned a smile, not forced, but deliberate, and opened the door with the warm poise she had cultivated over years of hosting. "Hello," she said softly. This time the smile reached her eyes. She truly was glad they were here. Buffalo Grove, the quiet Chicago suburb she had called home for nearly a decade, lay deep in winter's grip. The cold bit sharply enough to turn every exhale into pale mist. Her house, tucked away in a rustic corner near the main street's old brick shops and antique storefronts, was close enough to walk to town. Not that she often did. 7 years earlier, she'd left her struggles behind in Champaign-Urbana and started over here. The two women at her doorstep, faces pink from the icy wind, looked grateful for the promise of heat inside. "Come in, quick! You'll freeze out there," Margot urged, stepping back to let them enter. Winter decided to arrive early this year. The women didn't need guidance. They knew this house as well as their own. Coats and scarves came off and were hung neatly on the wooden rack by the door. The main living space opened up before them. Lofty pine beams stretched overhead. A broad fireplace roared within a semicircular brick hearth, evoking a mountain lodge. Plush chairs and a soft sofa circled the fire, arranged to catch its warmth. Framed family photos lined the walls. Shelves carried tokens from years past. A television sat above the mantel, and in the far corner, beyond tightly drawn French doors, a white baby grand piano gleamed beneath the soft light, its surface scattered with carefully arranged photographs. From somewhere behind them, the steady rhythm of a grandfather clock ticked without fail. "Hey, Margot, how are you holding up?" asked the taller of the two women, a brunette brushing wind-blown strands from her face. "Cold enough for you?" Margot gave her a dry look, half amused. "Why does everyone say that the second winter hits?" Her faint southern drawl softened the tease. "Every single person. Cold enough for you? Like we don't all feel it." The mock Chicago accent she adopted earned chuckles from both visitors. "Ignore her," the other woman said with a laugh. "It's just a greeting, that's all." This was Renee Foster. Slightly shorter than Gabrielle, the brunette, but nearly matching her height thanks to her ever-present heels, Renee carried herself with the elegance of her Scandinavian roots. Her pale skin and cropped blonde hair gave her a clean, effortless beauty. Though she'd lived in the U.S. for more than 10 years, faint traces of her native accent lingered, especially when she grew flustered. Today she was dressed with understated sophistication, snug tights, tall leather boots with a modest heel, and a knitted dress whose built-in scarf fastened neatly at her throat. Where Gabrielle's look was polished and precise, perfect makeup, every detail intentional, Renee's face was bare, yet no less striking. "Is she here yet?" Gabrielle asked, glancing toward the empty hallway. Margot shook her head and eased into a cushioned chair near the entryway. "Not yet. I told her after 4, she should be here soon." She nodded toward the coffee table where steam curled from cups of tea and coffee. "Help yourselves." Renee sighed, almost theatrically. "So we're doing this again? Reopening everything we've worked so hard to bury?" "That's exactly what we're doing," Gabrielle answered simply. "You know why. The people who come to us, they need proof. proof that we've stood where they stand now, that we aren't above them or below them, but just human. That's how they learn to trust us. And once they trust us, we can help them. She folded her hands in her lap, voice softening. And honestly, sharing helps me too. Every time I tell my story, I notice something new. I get a little closer to making sense of it. It's like worrying a loose tooth. You keep prodding until one day, it finally lets go. Renee's shoulders drooped, the fight in her voice gone. I know, I do. It's just, every time we tell it, I feel like I'm back there, living it all over again instead of moving past it. And afterward, I feel worse. No one's making you stay, Gabrielle said gently. When you're ready to move on, maybe you won't need this anymore. But the fact that you're still here, it means part of you is still healing. Margot nodded quietly, balancing her hot chocolate in one hand and gesturing soothingly with the other. Renee managed a faint, reluctant smile as she poured herself coffee. A comfortable hush fell over the room, the kind born from shared history rather than absence of words. Gabrielle caught Renee's eye and offered a small, almost playful smile, breaking the moment. So, Gabrielle said at last, did either of you catch The Good Wife last night? Renee groaned in mock despair. God, are we really that desperate for small talk? Then, with a wry glance toward Margot, she added, coffee's good, though. Margot smiled faintly, comforted by the easy banter despite the weight lingering in the air. Better than that awful stuff Deanna used to make, Renee finished, and the three women laughed quietly together as the fire popped and crackled in the hearth. Do you remember that? Renee asked, curling her finger into her mouth and pretending to gag. She broke into a laugh. God, it was terrible, wasn't it? The sound of the doorbell sliced through the moment, pulling all three women's attention toward the hallway. Well, Margot said, setting her mug of hot chocolate down on the side table. Guess I'll play hostess this time. She rose from the couch and walked toward the front door, leaving Gabrielle and Renee in the living room. I wish Deanna was still here, Gabrielle murmured, a wistful edge in her voice. She's living her own life now, Renee replied. Moved on from all of this. We still see her now and then, but she doesn't need us anymore. Trey made sure of that. She hesitated, voice dropping to nearly a whisper. Ryan, too. The weight of their failed schemes still clung to the air, a bitter reminder of plans that had gone nowhere. All that effort after the game, Ed, Renee muttered under her breath. Moments later, Margot returned with a woman who looked no older than 30. Her hair, bleached almost white, showed dark roots growing in at the crown. Her pale skin was flushed pink, whether from crying, from the cold outside, or both was impossible to tell. She wore a thin summer coat over a fitted wool dress that reached her knees, her posture tense and slightly hunched, like she was fighting off the chill. Ladies, Margot said warmly, gesturing toward the newcomer. This is Renee, and that's Gabrielle. Then to the woman, you must be frozen. Gabrielle, would you mind getting Beatrice some coffee? You look like you need something warm, Margot continued. Beatrice, right? Or do you prefer Beatrice? The newcomer, Beatrice, glanced around the cozy room, taking in the sight of the two women watching her with quiet curiosity. Oh, yeah, Beatrice. 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 Whatever works, she said with a half shrug, her tone defensive yet resigned. Just don't call me hey slut. Julian used that one enough. Come sit by the fire, Margot urged gently. Sugar? Cream? Beatrice lowered herself into the chair angled toward the couch, relief flickering across her face as Gabrielle handed her a steaming mug poured from the china set on the coffee table. Black, Beatrice said quickly. No sugar. How about your men? Renee blurted before she could stop herself, the joke falling flat the moment it left her mouth. Don't mind her, Margot said softly, cutting in as Beatrice's face stiffened. She likes to think she's funny. We haven't corrected her yet. Sorry, Renee muttered. I get edgy with new people. Beatrice studied her for a beat, weighing the apology. Finally, she gave a clipped nod. "It's fine," she said, using the kind of fine women only use when it isn't fine at all, but they'll let it go. Anyone watching closely could tell Beatrice wasn't the type to put up with much nonsense. "So, Beatrice," Margot began carefully, "we usually start with a little icebreaker. We know you're hurting. Trust me, we've all been there. None of us would be here if we didn't understand. This is your space to talk if you want, but tonight, we like to share our stories first. That way, you'll know you're safe. You're among people who get it." Beatrice hesitated, then managed a tentative smile in Gabriel's direction. "That sounds okay, I guess. I just feel lost right now, like everything's upside down. I've done so much, and now I don't even know what's next. He barely talks to me. Everything goes through that shark of a lawyer. I've hated him for years. He's such a weasel." Gabrielle scooted closer on the couch, gently resting a comforting hand on Beatrice's arm. "It's okay," Gabrielle said softly. "We've been right where you are. It doesn't feel like it now, but it gets better. Slowly, but it does." "And remember," Margot added, "we're not about tearing men apart. This isn't some bitter coven out to hate every guy alive. Like I said on the phone, this group is about finding our footing again. We take responsibility for what we've done. We don't come here to justify our choices or to blame someone else for everything. We face what happened, accept it, and move forward." "Exactly," Renee said, nodding. "We own our part. Sure, the circumstances were rough, but everyone's got to face their own. We've all messed up. That's why we're here. This group is about lifting each other up and figuring out how to move past it. Like a 12-step program," she added dryly, "minus the steps, and none of that higher power stuff that makes me twitch." Beatrice let out a trembling sigh, her voice cracking as she spoke. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm stuck in this crappy one-bedroom. I've only seen my kids 4 times since everything blew up. The only lawyer I can afford is disgusting, and Julian keeps saying he'll treat me fine in the divorce. But I don't even want a divorce, and he won't even talk to me. Not really talk. We talked, but the words didn't immediately erupt into shouting or accusations. Beatrice's voice wavered as she reached the end of her story, each phrase thick with frustration that seemed to deepen as she spoke. "It's all right, Beatrice," someone murmured softly. "You don't need to worry. We're here for you. We're not here to help you get revenge or destroy your husband's life, but you're not alone in this. We've been where you are, and we'll stand with you." "Why?" Beatrice let out a sharp, almost mocking laugh as her eyes darted from one face to another. The question wasn't filled with anger. It was more bewildered than anything, tinged with shame and self-pity. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me. You don't know what I've done, or what I'm still doing." Her last words cracked, breaking into a strained sob. Renee and Gabrielle exchanged a cautious glance, neither sure what to say. Explaining why they themselves had ended up there, why they had once made similar choices, was never easy. Those were scars that never fully healed. "If you want to tell us why you're here, you don't have to explain every detail," Renee said gently. "No," Beatrice interrupted quickly, shaking her head hard. "I can. I want to. I need to. Nobody in my family will hear me out, and God knows Julian doesn't want to." "Are you certain, sweetheart?" Margot leaned forward, her voice low with worry. "We don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for." Beatrice managed a faint, grateful smile. "It's okay, it's hard, but I think I have to say it out loud." "All right," Margot replied, motioning toward the group with an open hand. "Take your time. Say what you need to. Stop whenever you have to." "My name is Beatrice, Beatrice Sloan. Well, it was. I'll probably go back to Beatrice Hall before long." She paused, letting her own words settle around her like a weight. The silence that followed was sharp, broken only by the steady ticking of a grandfather clock somewhere behind them. After a few moments, Beatrice exhaled shakily, startled by how quiet the room had become. "Anyway," she said softly, I was married to Julian Sloan. I'm 32, though everyone says I look younger. Julian is 35. I grew up here in Orland Park, born and raised in the south suburbs. Julian is from Chicago too, full-blooded Irish, big family, tons of brothers and sisters. You know the type? One's a cop, two are firefighters. Julian works in finance. He used to trade, but it burned him out. Now he consults, helps companies design trading strategies and all that. In his free time, he's been teaming up with some developers on an automated trading app for iPhones. At least, I think that's what it is. I'm not even sure. Beatrice gave a small shake of her head, frustrated that she didn't know more. I'm a paralegal at a law firm downtown. I planned on becoming a lawyer, but between the cost of the bar exam and the insane hours, I couldn't bring myself to give up my entire life for it. She inhaled deeply before continuing. We were married for 8 years. We have 2 kids, Tara and Adrian. They're amazing. I know every parent says that, but they really are. Beatrice's mouth curved into the faintest smile as she pulled out her phone, swiping to the folder labeled Kids. She handed the phone to Gabrielle, her hand trembling slightly. Gabrielle leaned toward Renee, both of them murmuring the kind of admiring remarks people always do when shown pictures of children, before passing the phone to Margot, who reacted the same way. So? Gabrielle asked quietly, returning the phone. Yeah, Beatrice said under her breath. Yeah, it was good. A good marriage. Julian, he was wonderful. Her expression softened, eyes drifting as if replaying old memories. We met at a church party, of all places. Neither of us were really religious. I was helping my sister serve cake. She's a pastry chef. And Julian was volunteering with Big Brothers Big Sisters. That's Julian for you. Always the Boy Scout, always saving someone. It was one of those love-at-first-sight things. We talked for hours that night. He put his number in my phone, snapped a selfie for the contact picture, and made me do the same for him. She laughed quietly at the memory. You know how it goes. Dates, movies, flowers, late nights, every romantic gesture you can think of. If there was a grand gesture to make, Julian would pull it off. When he proposed, he even had his dog bring me the ring. My family adored him, and I thought he adored me too. I guess in a strange way, I liked it. More than I ever should have. My voice dropped so low at the end it was barely audible. Gabrielle and Renee exchanged a look, quiet, sharp, understanding, and Gabrielle's gaze drifted toward Margot. Margot hadn't taken her eyes off me once. She was studying me with that unflinching calm of hers. By now, everyone knew where this story was heading. You didn't need a map, it was obvious. There were years when everything felt perfect. Julian was devoted, gentle, and made me feel cherished in every possible way, even in bed, which, trust me, I'd had enough experience to know, was rare. We never lacked passion. We raised 2 incredible kids together, kids who turned out better than we ever dared hope. Arguments? Barely any. We had a beautiful house out in Schaumburg, far enough from family that no one popped in uninvited, but close enough that visits were easy when we wanted them. Life was better than good. It was ideal, which makes what I did next feel all the more unforgivable. For 3 months, I was sleeping with Julian's brother, with Miles, and I still can't tell you exactly why or how it began. It started at a barbecue, a couple of drinks, playful teasing, the kind everyone in Julian's family does. I tossed a few flirty comments back, nothing serious. At least, that's what I told myself. But somehow it shifted. I can't pinpoint the exact moment. I wasn't drunk enough to blame it on beer. It felt more like I'd stepped outside myself and was watching someone else live my life. Even now, I can't explain what I thought I was doing, or what I thought I felt. The banter became bolder, reckless, and then it crossed a line. I let it. I don't even know why. Gabrielle and Renee shared another silent glance. Margot never looked away. They'd all heard stories like this before. They knew the danger. They also knew the allure. You know what I'm talking about, right? That thrill of doing something forbidden, that rush of being bad, really bad, it's intoxicating. And for me, it was fun. Terrible, wrong, exhilarating fun. So yes, I gave in. And the second it ended, I knew I'd just detonated my own life. Beatrice paused then, scanning their faces for judgment. Fear flickered across her features, the fear of what they'd think of her now. "You don't have to share more than you want," Margot said softly, her voice steady. "Only what you feel ready to." Renee and Gabrielle exchanged small, knowing smiles. They remembered what it felt like to confess their first ugly truths to the group. Beatrice, though, had always been different. Raw, unfiltered. She didn't sugarcoat. She couldn't. After that first time, I couldn't look Julian in the eye. Not at the party, not afterward. Forget kissing him. I couldn't even stand next to him without feeling like he'd somehow see right through me, like he'd know. But he didn't. He noticed something was off, sure, asked if I was okay, told me he'd give me space if I needed it, that he was there whenever I was ready to talk. That was Julian. Steady, kind, maddeningly patient. Talk to him? Like that was even possible. Instead, I spent the next week destroying myself in my own head, swearing it would never happen again, swearing I'd never be alone with Miles. Because it wasn't about Miles. I didn't love him. It wasn't about him at all. It was about the risk, the danger, the sharp edge of doing something so unforgivably wrong. Beatrice's eyes darted nervously between the women. Gabrielle gave the smallest nod. Renee's expression softened. They understood exactly what she meant. "Yes," Gabrielle murmured. Renee agreed with a single nod. Margot reached over and took Beatrice's hand. "We get it," she said. "We really do." Beatrice drew a shaky breath and kept going. My promise lasted 2 weeks. Then one night, Julian had to stay late at work. Miles came by, said he needed something from the garage. The kids were at a friend's house. I tried to send him away, but somehow we ended up talking, laughing, sitting way too close. And then, God help me, I let him touch me again. The worst part? My voice cracked at this part, half sob, half confession. I wanted it. I wanted him. I don't even know why. That was the real beginning. After that, it became routine. Miles came over whenever he knew Julian was gone and the house was quiet. We never talked about Julian. Never about the kids. Never about Miles's fiancée. We existed in this strange, sealed-off bubble where none of that mattered. There was never love in it. We'd even go out together sometimes, me, Julian, Miles, and his fiancée, sitting at the same dinner tables, sharing inside jokes no one suspected. No secret glances, no lingering touches. We looked exactly like what we were supposed to be. He was my secret escape. I was his. And the guilt? Of course it was there, but I buried it. I shoved it so deep inside I barely felt it anymore. At home, I played the perfect wife. Sometimes I pulled away from Julian when he reached for me. Other times, I was the one who initiated, almost desperate to prove to myself I still loved him. And I did. God help me, I loved him so much. This time was no exception. If anything, it cut even deeper. Now I had something to compare Miles's icy detachment to. Julian had been patient with me, kind in ways Miles never was. He had truly loved me. And somehow, I still ruined everything. When the truth finally surfaced, Beatrice wiped her cheeks, forcing the last words out as emotion crashed over her like waves. I still don't know how Julian uncovered it. Maybe that's irrelevant now. Miles was the one who called, his voice flat. He knows. And then he hung up. I froze. I didn't know the extent of what Julian had learned, whether he had the full picture or just fragments. Did he realize it happened inside our home? Did he know every ugly detail? Should I start packing? Should I stay and face him? In the end, I cleaned the entire house and sat there, waiting for him to walk through the door. But he didn't. Not that night. I didn't know if I should call, stay silent, pretend nothing had happened. The kids asked where he was, and I lied. Said work was keeping him late. 3 days passed before he finally came back. He looked destroyed, hollowed out, and I couldn't even find words. I stepped toward him, desperate to bridge the gap, but he pulled away. His expression twisted with fury and heartbreak. He spat words at me, vicious, cutting, whore, slut. Later, I learned he'd gone after Miles, confronted him physically, severed all ties, and demanded their parents do the same, or lose him too. Then he exposed everything to Miles's fiancée. She turned her rage on me, and I couldn't think straight. I tried to speak to Julian, but he wouldn't listen, just shouted for me to shut up and get out. 4 days later, the divorce papers arrived. They even had photographs. He told me to leave. I began packing for the kids, but he screamed that I was leaving alone. They were staying with him. For the first time, real fear gripped me. I threw what I could into bags and ran. He was unshaven, bloodshot, vibrating with anger. I hardly recognized him. And honestly, I understood. I'd betrayed him, with his brother. But understanding didn't make it less terrifying. I'd never seen that feral look in his eyes before. I don't think he would have hurt me, but there was something primal in his stare that chilled me. Gabrielle and Margot exchanged glances, sympathy softening their features. "It's all right," Margot said gently. "That's in the past. We're not here to judge." Beatrice let out a strangled sob, forcing a trembling smile toward the three women. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought I was over this." She paused, steadying herself, then smiled again, a fragile, defiant curve of her lips. "Now I'm living in some rundown studio. He's divorcing me for adultery. His brother, completely erased from their lives. I still see the kids," she went on. "They don't really understand. Julian doesn't keep them from me, but he makes sure we never cross paths. I pick them up at his parents' house and bring them back there. That's the arrangement." Her voice cracked. "But that's not even the worst of it." The women sat in silence, watching Beatrice's eyes flick nervously between them before dropping to the floor. "I don't even know if I can say this," she murmured. After a long pause, the confession spilled out in a rush. "I'm still seeing him." The room went still. None of them moved. Beatrice's voice hollowed as she continued staring at the carpet. "He calls me sometimes, tells me to meet him at a motel, and I go. I can't even explain why. Julian gives me barely enough to get by. I've thought about finding a job. I've even thought about ending everything. But then I think of the kids. And still, when Miles calls, I go. It's like I'm numb, moving on autopilot. I don't even know what I'm doing. Maybe he just wants revenge now. Maybe I deserve it." The silence thickened, heavy and suffocating. The women struggled to respond, the weight of her confession pressing down on all of them. Margot finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "I have to ask, do you even want this? Do you want to keep going to him?" "No," Beatrice whispered, not lifting her head. "Then," Margot said, her tone decisive, "we have to put a stop to it." She turned toward Renee. "Do you still have that spare room?" Renee nodded. "Good. Beatrice can stay with you. That's settled." Her tone left no room for argument, and Renee didn't object. "I'll go with her to pack," Renee added quickly, meeting Beatrice's stunned gaze. "If that's okay with you?" Beatrice's tear-streaked face lifted, astonished. "You'd really do that?" "Of course," Gabrielle said softly. "We'll figure this out. You don't have to face this alone. That man, he's still chasing you?" Gabrielle continued quietly. "We'll help you confront him and push him out of your life." "Then it's decided," Margot said, her voice calm but resolute. "You'll stay with Renee until you find your footing again. She'll help keep him away. Honestly, a man like that, going after his own brother's wife, he deserves whatever's coming to him." "Seriously?" The words slipped out, and instantly, the charged silence in the room softened. Everyone leaned back a little, shoulders loosening as though an invisible weight had lifted. Beatrice fished through her purse and pulled out a pack of makeup wipes, dabbing carefully at the black streaks of mascara beneath her swollen eyes. "Sweetheart," Margot murmured after a long, thoughtful pause, tilting her head slightly. "Have you thought about talking to a therapist?" Beatrice's answer came in a small shake of her head. I've considered it, but I wouldn't even know where to begin. I wanted Julian and me to try marriage counseling, but he won't even let me mention it." Margot nodded slowly, her tone steady and pragmatic. "That's not unusual, love. With everything that's happened, and how he feels toward you right now, he's not ready to hear you. Honestly?" She leaned forward, voice gentle but plain-spoken. "I can't say I blame him. There's only so much time where fixing things is even an option. If the hurt person refuses to try, nothing can move forward. Maybe you should take this moment to focus on yourself. Understand what happened. Learn how to steady your mind. So if there's ever another conversation, you'll meet it on your feet instead of drowning. It might already be too late. But falling apart in front of him won't help. The fact that he's still willing to speak to you instead of shutting you out completely, that's something." Gabrielle broke the silence next. "Beatrice, you should see my therapist. She's incredible." "What about the one Deanna went to?" Margot asked, glancing toward Gabrielle. Gabrielle shook her head firmly. She needs a woman. Just look at her." Margot studied Beatrice's trembling shoulders and tear-streaked face. "You're probably right," she admitted softly. "Can you picture her?" Margot asked quietly. "Yeah," Gabrielle said with a faint, reassuring smile. "I can describe her." Beatrice hesitated, biting her lip. I don't even know if I can afford it. I'm still on Julian's insurance, but I have no idea if therapy's even covered." "Hush, child," Margot said, her voice briefly sharp before softening with warmth. "Don't worry about that part. We'll help figure it out. What matters is that you talk to someone who actually knows what they're doing. We can comfort you, sure, but we're not trained for this. The money will sort itself out later." Beatrice sniffled, twisting a tissue in her hands, eyes darting nervously between them. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Why? Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. I don't know you. Why do you care so much?" The question hung in the air, raw, honest, the same unspoken thought that had hovered over the room all night. It was the reason she was here at all. Margot let out a low hum, almost like bracing herself for a story too heavy to tell in one breath. "Well," she began carefully, "we've all been through things. You've probably heard us mention that before, that we've been where you are." She paused, letting the weight of that truth sink in. "We don't say it lightly. Every one of us has made mistakes we regret, hurt people we loved, taken wrong turns, sometimes made everything worse before it got better. Out of that chaos, we built this circle. A place where people like us, people who've fallen apart, can speak freely, sift through the wreckage, and either rebuild what's left or start fresh if we have to." Beatrice's eyes widened slightly. "So, all of you messed up too? Like I did?" Gabrielle let out a soft laugh, gentle but knowing. "Oh, honey, you have no idea." "Really?" Beatrice asked, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at her lips, the first flicker of light she'd shown all night. "Oh, absolutely," Renee chimed in firmly. "Big-time screw-ups. In fact," Margot added, "when someone new joins us, we usually tell our own stories first. It helps show that we're not here to judge or preach. We've lived it. Want to hear them? To know who we are and why we get what you're going through?" Beatrice blinked at them. Margot, Gabrielle, Renee, and then gave a small, quick nod, almost surprised by her own willingness. "All right then," Margot said, standing up. "Who's starting?" "I'm getting myself another hot chocolate." "Gabrielle? Renee?" Gabrielle and Renee exchanged a look before Gabrielle sighed, muttering with reluctant humor, "Fine, I'll go first." No one missed the fact that Margot slipped conveniently into the kitchen right at that moment, a well-worn trick to avoid leading with her own story. Once Margot disappeared, Gabrielle set her coffee aside and shifted in her chair, squaring her shoulders. Okay, she exhaled. Where do I even begin? She straightened up a little. I'm Gabrielle Taryn. Back then, I was Gabrielle Nape. But that feels like another lifetime. I'm 38 now, divorced nearly 4 years. I work at a community college, not a professor, just mid-level faculty. I help adults with GEDs, prep classes, mostly English. Sometimes I cover PE when they're short-staffed. A faint, wry smile curved her lips. I spend a lot of time at the gym. Actually, I teach pole dancing on the side. And belly dance too, though most people show up for the pole work. They all want to learn how to spin without looking ridiculous. Gabrielle laughed softly, almost sheepish. Yeah, I know. It sounds silly, but it pays. And trust me, you wouldn't believe the muscle it takes to hang upside down on a pole for 10 minutes straight. Her smile faded, voice dropping softer. I was married to Samuel. He was amazing. Back then, life felt flawless. It was everything you picture marriage to be, Beatrice. Probably a lot like what you've experienced yourself. Samuel and I met not long after graduating college. Before him, I'd been the kind of girl who lived for the nightlife, always out, meeting new guys, hooking up sometimes, pushing boundaries farther than most people my age. Then Samuel came along, and all of that stopped overnight. I didn't resent leaving it behind. I didn't even miss it. I'd lived that chapter, wrung every drop out of it, and felt ready for something different. Teaching had already humbled me. My attempt at student teaching here in town had been a disaster. I was ready for a fresh start. We crossed paths at an alumni mixer. He was an alum too, though from another branch of the university. And honestly, it was immediate. The kind of instant connection people usually roll their eyes at. Love at first sight. I was hooked, and so was he. All those ridiculous cliches, fluttering stomach, giddy smiles, stars in your eyes, suddenly felt real. On our very first date, we were already talking about forever. Kids, where we'd settle down, what faith we'd raise them in. It all came up that night. It sounds naive now, almost laughable, but we grew up on fairy tale endings and thought ours was guaranteed. And for a long time, it truly felt like it was. By the time Margot walked back into the room, just as I was wrapping up that part of the story, she caught the last few words and, to everyone's surprise, gave a quiet nod. She even signed along as if confirming it herself. Things had moved fast for us. Within 3 months we were living together. 9 months later, we were married. And those first years, they were genuinely good. We had so much in common. Samuel worked as a sports massage therapist and somehow always knew how to dissolve every knot of tension, physical and otherwise. I won't lie. In every possible way, he knew exactly what he was doing. But comfort has a way of softening into something else. Not hatred, never that, but complacency. I can't even say when it shifted. Life got busy. I threw myself into teaching, and that's when I crossed paths with him. There's always that one person, the one you never meant to notice. Gabrielle wiggled her fingers in the air, drawing invisible quotation marks. Samuel was buried in work, chasing career milestones, and this other man, he was simply intriguing. Samuel and I never had children. We were both focused on our careers, and his job carried the possibility of relocating, so we kept putting it off. It was just us. He poured himself into training for a position with the Olympic massage team, and I started teaching yoga classes at the gym. That's where I met Darren, a personal trainer. You already know the type without me saying much. He started dropping into my classes, claiming he wanted to improve his flexibility. I should have been stronger, but one night it just happened. Like you said, Beatrice, it felt like the only thing that mattered right then. I couldn't explain it, not then, not even now. You can probably guess the rest. The only pause in the whole moment was when he darted off to flick the lights off and shut down the security cameras. After that, there was no stopping it. And the wildest part, Samuel never crossed my mind. Not once. There was no love in it, no yearning for anything lasting, just a reckless moment I convinced myself didn't count. I felt guilty, sure, but not enough to walk away. I told myself Samuel would never know, that it was meaningless. Over the next few weeks it happened 3, maybe 4 more times. Only when the stars aligned, never something either of us chased. Darren didn't pursue me, didn't linger afterward. It was purely circumstantial. I think it mattered as little to him as it did to me. What surprised me most was what came after that first time. I remember sitting alone at home, wine glass in hand, asking myself why I'd done it. I loved Samuel, truly loved him. So why would I betray him? And then I understood. In my head, it didn't touch the life I had with Samuel. It felt like a separate world. Twisted logic, I know, but at the time it almost seemed rational. It didn't change how I loved him. If anything, it made me realize how rare, how irreplaceable he was. Of course, if it truly didn't matter, I should have been able to walk away after that first mistake. But back then, I told myself it didn't affect anything. I believed, wrongly, that Samuel and I were untouchable, that what we had was stronger than one reckless secret. The room stayed silent for a long moment. The women sat there, each holding their coffee, lost in thought. Margot tossed a few more logs into the fire, then settled back into her chair, her gaze fixed on me as I finally spoke again. "But here's the truth," I said softly. "Just because it meant nothing to me doesn't mean it wouldn't mean everything to someone else, Samuel or anyone, really." And that's where everything unraveled. What happened with Darren was nothing more than physical. I could sense he was drawn to me at first, but once he got what he wanted, whatever spark existed between us faded into something cold, routine. We shared a handful of fleeting encounters, never anything substantial, and when he left for Idaho, he didn't even say goodbye. I didn't either. That silence summed up everything about us, or rather, what wasn't there. In my head, I'd already closed that chapter long before he walked away. I had to claw through the wreckage of my own choices to find anything redeeming in it. That was the best I could manage. I wasn't out hunting for another escape, but if distractions crossed my path, they had nothing to do with Samuel. I loved him. He loved me. Isn't it strange how easily you can convince yourself of something that isn't true? I've said before, I teach college. English, creative writing, to be exact. A few years after Darren was out of the picture, and during that stretch I stayed loyal to Samuel. I was running workshops when a new student enrolled. He was already a poet with some early recognition, even a few publications under his belt. But as he put it himself, success only showed me how little I actually knew and how much my editors saved me from myself, especially with commas. He told me the harder he worked at refining his voice, the less precise his writing felt. Odd, right? That's why he came back to community college, to rebuild from the ground up. That's where I met Landon, 23 years old, much younger than me. Landon was fire embodied, the kind of poet who practically shakes with intensity at readings, flinging himself into every word. And he was gifted, shockingly gifted. Gabrielle's gaze flicked across Margot, Renee, and Beatrice's doubtful faces. "You get the picture," she said softly. Her tone shifted as she continued, a trace of warmth creeping in. He carried this brooding, gothic energy, dark, magnetic, and one night, curiosity got the better of me. I wondered if that raw intensity he poured into his poetry might spill over into the bedroom. It did. He was good. We enjoyed ourselves. By that point, I'd buried whatever guilt I had left. I'd convinced myself that because it didn't mean anything to me, it didn't have to mean anything to anyone else. We slept together a handful of times, half a dozen, maybe more, and I never let it weigh on me. But then Landon started wanting something more. I brushed him off. To him, what we had felt profound. To me, it was hollow. Maybe I should have seen it coming. He was a poet after all heart, no breaks. I told him plainly, this was physical, nothing more. I loved my husband. That would never change. Landon could never be Samuel. We could enjoy what this was, but it went no further. Of course, he didn't listen, and I didn't see the danger in that. When he wrote a poem about me, I thought it was flattering. That's all. I didn't realize what he was really saying between the lines. He saved it for a public reading, one I attended with Samuel, and that's when he chose to bare everything, declaring his love for me, begging me to leave my husband and be his muse. To him, it was some sweeping cinematic gesture. To Samuel, it was a public humiliation, especially when Landon admitted, in front of everyone, that he and I had already been intimate. That's when Samuel broke. I had never seen him like that. He flipped a heavy wooden table, sent it crashing, just to get to Landon, who suddenly looked terrified. You could see it in his eyes. This wasn't an audience ready to swoon over tortured love poems. This was a furious husband fighting through bodies to get to him. Gabrielle paused, breath catching, eyes wide at the memory. The moment Landon said those words, Samuel turned and looked right at me, she whispered. I couldn't deny it. He knew, and that was all it took. He lost control. Samuel hit him once, just once, but it was enough to drop him flat. The room erupted, people pulling Landon away, others restraining Samuel. Someone tried to drag me out, but I fought them, screaming. The police arrived. Everyone was pointing at Samuel. Everything unraveled right there. By the time they got him under control, he'd gone quiet, wouldn't look at me, wouldn't say a word. They took him in. I followed the car to the station. He spent the night in jail. The next morning, they let him go. No charges, nothing they could hold him on. I'll never forget seeing him walk out. He hadn't shaved, eyes red and hollow, stinking of sweat and fury. He didn't even glance at me, just got into the car, silent. We drove home without a word. I didn't know how to start. I tried, twice, maybe 3 times to speak. Each time, he shut me down with a single look. When we got back, he went straight to the closet and started pulling out bags. I knew what that meant. I stood in the doorway, begging him to yell, to curse me, to do something, anything. But all he said, quietly, over and over, was, "Move, leave me alone." I hit a wall. I realized I couldn't stop him, so I stepped aside. I let him go. What else could I do? I told myself he just needed time, space to untangle what he felt. I believed, somehow, someday, we'd talk. That I'd make him understand I loved him, only him. And that everything else, every meaningless fling, was nothing. But even then, standing in the ruins of what I'd done, I still couldn't see through his eyes. I clung to my own lies instead of facing his truth, the truth I'd created. There was a long silence before Gabriel spoke again. He left, and the world went quiet. A week passed without a single word. No calls, no texts, not even a rumor of where he might be. Then, out of nowhere, a work request showed up on my desk. By then, I was barely functioning, fraying at the edges. They finally sent me home because I couldn't keep it together. After that, I only saw him one last time, just once. Can you even imagine that? I begged him to meet me for dinner so I could explain myself. My hands were shaking the entire time. It didn't help. I stumbled through the usual desperate lines people cling to when they've messed up beyond repair. It didn't mean anything. You're the only one I love. We can get past this. I'm sorry. But what else could I possibly say? He made sure I wouldn't drown financially. We sold the house. I ended up in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment out in Des Plaines. As for him, I never learned where he went. His friends pulled away, polite but distant, their smiles carefully measured. His family? Better not even bring them up. That blew up fast. I had no way of knowing where Samuel was or what was going through his head. Was he furious? Heartbroken? Numb? My thoughts circled endlessly, searching for answers I'd never get. Gabrielle absently twisted a strand of hair around her finger as she spoke. By that point, she wasn't even talking to anyone in particular. It felt more like a confession tossed into the air. I've been seeing a therapist. The same one we want you to try, Beatrice. She finally got me to admit something. I spent so much time convincing myself it didn't matter, and I still think it didn't, that I never once considered what it might have meant to him. If it was nothing to me, I figured it had to be nothing to everyone else too. Her voice wavered. I got so good at defending myself inside my own head that I refused to look at the damage it was doing to Samuel. Deep down, I think I knew exactly what I'd see if I faced it. So I didn't. I blinded myself on purpose. Gabrielle's gaze drifted back to the present, her expression a sad, tired smile, equal parts regret and resignation. It's easy to get lost in your own excuses. Beatrice, horrified, finally found her voice. So what happened? Did you ever tell him everything? I tried, Gabrielle said softly. That night at dinner, I laid it all out. Told him he was the only one I loved, that what happened actually proved how real that love was, which, in hindsight, was a terrible way to put it. I swore it wasn't about him. He's incredible, and I was the one who ruined things. I said all the desperate things people say, begged for a second chance, promised anything if he'd just forgive me. He sat there listening, stone-faced, and then called it all bullshit. Said if I'd really been happy, I wouldn't have looked elsewhere, that something must have been broken between us, or I never would have gone searching. And I didn't even know how to respond, because there wasn't anything wrong. And yet I still did it. She let out a long breath, remembering. I tried explaining that back in college I was just reckless, carefree. I saw things like this as harmless fun, nothing serious. That's all it was to me. But that only made him angrier. He asked, if it meant nothing, then why risk everything for it? Why gamble our entire marriage on something so meaningless? And honestly, that's a fair question. The therapist didn't have an answer either, other than I could, so I did. Which sounds horrible even now. It makes me sound selfish. Maybe I was. Then he asked why I hid it. If it was so innocent, why keep it secret? Why not even tell him? Maybe even encourage him to do the same, if it really didn't matter. And I had nothing. That silence was it for him. He looked at me and asked, almost casually, if Landon was the first. I swore up and down that he was, and I meant it. I hadn't even thought about Darren. That fling was so meaningless I'd practically forgotten it happened. I wasn't lying, I just never remembered it. It was years ago, it didn't even register. But somehow, Samuel found out. I don't know how. I never told anyone. No one saw us. Maybe Darren mentioned it in passing, I don't know. But Samuel knew, or at least suspected, and when he confronted me, I froze. He was right. Trying to explain myself, I couldn't even recall the details, because that's how little it mattered to me. But that didn't matter to him. All he saw was that I'd kept it from him, even if unintentionally. That shattered whatever trust was left. Her tone flattened. He just looked at me and said something like, well, if that's how it is, forget it. Then he tossed me a flash drive. On it was a recording. Someone at the gym describing one of my encounters with Darren. So much for privacy. I never saw Samuel again after that. He didn't even come to the divorce hearing, just sent his lawyer. We split everything down the middle and walked away. No kids, so there wasn't much else to untangle. Months later, through a friend of a friend, I heard he'd moved to San Diego. Started over there. He put every mile he could between us, between himself and the ghosts of what we used to be. I still stumble upon his photos now and then, buried in my feed when mutual friends comment. Each image feels like a reminder. His world kept spinning, and I'm no longer part of it. He looks good, healthier than I would have guessed, but I can see it plain as day. There's nothing in him that wants to reach back toward me. Across the table, Beatrice slid her hand over Gabrielle's, curling her fingers gently. "I hate that you're going through this," she whispered. Her voice trembled as she asked, "How do you manage it? How do you survive the day-to-day?" Gabrielle's shoulders lifted and fell in a quiet, almost robotic shrug. "You just keep moving. What's the alternative?" "You can't live in that pain forever," Beatrice said softly. "There comes a point where you have to learn to stand alone again, figure out where you belong, learn how to live with the noise and the chaos. The worst part? The silence after. When everything's settled and you're finally left with yourself, that's when the sorrow sets in. I was lucky, though." "Lucky?" Beatrice tilted her head. "Yeah," Gabrielle murmured. "Margot found me. She pulled me out of the wreckage. I won't sugarcoat it. I regret it all. Every choice, every mess I left behind. I wish I could undo it. But this circle we've made, it's not about pretending the past didn't happen." Her expression softened. "Therapy, and Margot, taught me how to carry it, to accept that it's stitched into me forever. But eventually, you have to stop gripping your grief like it's all you've got, and remember how to breathe." A hollow laugh escaped her. "So, yeah, I date sometimes, and it's cruel in a way. Dating just reminds you of what's gone. Sometimes the guys are kind, sometimes it's fun, but I never let myself get too happy. Because deep down, I'm terrified I'll ruin everything again. And they don't deserve that." She glanced toward Margot and Renee, her face softening into gratitude. "So I come here, I sit with them. We've all done things we wish we hadn't, and we've all got scars, but we show up for each other anyway." Her voice wavered. "I miss Samuel more than I know how to explain. I miss who he used to be, who we used to be, the stupid, reckless joy we shared. But I made choices, and I have to live with them." Drawing in a shaky breath, she finished, "So, I do my best. Maybe someday I'll meet someone like him, someone I can love without wrecking it. Until then, I just keep trying." Beatrice's chest ached. She leaned forward instinctively and pulled Gabrielle into her arms. Gabrielle stiffened at first, then melted into the embrace. These days, a simple, kind touch, one with no hidden agenda, no strings, felt like a gift. She hadn't realized how much she needed that closeness until it was gone. "That's me," Gabrielle said when she finally pulled back, offering a small, crooked smile. "It's messy. It doesn't wrap up neatly with a bow, not yet. But it's proof life keeps going." She pushed back her chair and stood, brushing her palms against her jeans. "All right, I need more coffee. Renee, you're up." Gabrielle stepped aside, blinking hard against the sting of tears. Renee, ever the one to cut through heaviness, muttered with a smirk, "Well, screw her. I liked partying with her." The sudden irreverence sent laughter around the table, Margot and Beatrice chuckling, Gabrielle sniffling but smiling through it. "So?" Beatrice leaned forward, curiosity softening her features. "What about you? What's your story?" For the first time that night, Beatrice felt the weight lift from her shoulders. Here, she wasn't being measured or compared. No one judged her. They were all equals in their flaws. Renee waved a hand in dismissal. "My husband and I, we played around, pushed some boundaries. Things got out of hand. He couldn't deal. That's the short version." A hush settled over the group. Margot sipped her hot chocolate, eyes fixed on Renee. Renee stared back, daring her to challenge it. Margot's lips pressed into a thin line, holding something back. Finally, Renee exhaled sharply and looked down. "Fine," she muttered. "You're right. I'll tell it. But it's like tearing a bandage off a wound that hasn't healed." Beatrice's hand twitched toward her. "You don't have to—" "No," Renee cut in, voice firm. "Margot's right. That's why we're here." The silence stretched as she gathered her thoughts. "My name's Renee Frey," she began slowly. "I grew up in Finland. Came to the U.S. at 18 for an exchange program. Ended up at Northwestern, studied engineering, and never went back." A faint smile touched her lips. I fell in love with it here. Chicago, America, all of it. Became a citizen eventually. Finland's beautiful, sure, but half the year's dark, the other half's endless sunlight, and the cold. It feels personal. Here, you drive an hour and watch entire seasons change in front of you. Beaches, snow, city skylines. You get it all. And the men, she added with a playful grin. God, the men. I could have gone on a date with a different cowboy every day of the week. Laughter bubbled through the room, easing the heaviness that lingered. In my last year of college, engineering, mind you, let me tell you something. If you ever want to feel like royalty, be a woman in engineering. There were hardly any of us. The guys were desperate. Not to brag, but I was basically Miss January, and February, and March. The women laughed again, tension dissolving, at least for a moment. During my last year of college, I crossed paths with Julian. At that time, I was still wide-eyed and untested, quiet, almost unnoticeable. Julian was the opposite, self-assured, worldly, and impossibly polished. He carried himself as though the world belonged to him, and before I realized it, I was caught in his gravitational pull. His existence looked effortless from the outside. He didn't come from unimaginable wealth, but his family's money meant he never had to worry about rent or paychecks. There was always a cushion, a safety net. He occupied this liminal space, not ostentatious about privilege, but never without it either. And more importantly, he had this uncanny ability to connect people. Julian wasn't the one hammering out contracts himself. Instead, he introduced the right people to each other, the ones who made things happen, and took his share when the deal closed. In Chicago, everyone seemed to recognize his last name. Doors opened before he even knocked. He was equally at home drinking cheap beer in a Southside dive or savoring prime rib in an upscale steakhouse later that same night, and he always kept me within arm's reach through it all. I first saw him at a university fundraiser. He had this magnetism about him, a blend of charm and sharp wit that drew people in. I was buried in my engineering studies back then, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, that seemed to fascinate him. From our first conversation, there was this undeniable spark. My world began to stretch wider than I ever imagined. The relationship that followed felt like something out of a movie. Thrilling, all-consuming. Julian was endlessly patient, explaining little nuances of American life I hadn't figured out yet. And if I'm being honest, you can probably see where this is headed. We got married 10 months later. My parents flew from Finland for the ceremony. They loathed everything about the United States, the noise, the chaos, the constant rush. But they kept their opinions to themselves and smiled through the whole event for my sake. Tolerated, Gabrielle cut in with a teasing grin. What? Renee blinked. You said tolerate. Past tense is tolerated. Sorry, force of habit. Teacher brain. Renee stared at her a second too long, then smirked. 13 years living here, and she's still correcting me. Gabrielle sipped her coffee, visibly pleased with herself. Renee rolled her eyes but carried on with her story. Anyway, we got married, and for a while things were good. We did what most couples do, had 2 kids, Xander, our son, and Lena, our daughter. For 4 or 5 years, life felt complete. Then, little by little, something began to shift. I loved my children, still do more than anything. But at some point, I realized I was existing solely for them and had forgotten what it meant to live for myself. Julian, though I was the only one who ever called him that, got busier and busier. Constant travel, endless meetings, some massive deal he was always just about to close. Somewhere along the way, we started drifting apart. And in case you're wondering, no, I never cheated. That's not the story here. When the deal finally wrapped, Julian came home and we finally sat down, really sat down, to talk about us. About the monotony creeping into everything. About the quiet ache we both felt for more. Not more people, but more life. And that conversation cracked something open we hadn't anticipated. We started asking questions we'd never dared before. Could we push boundaries? What counted as betrayal? Where did the line even exist? Julian admitted he'd always been curious about having a threesome with another woman. I laughed. Don't they all? The women listening to me now know exactly what I mean. We made jokes about it. But then I asked, okay, and what about me? If you get that, do I get the same with another man? How would that sit with you? I wasn't trying to provoke him. I genuinely wanted to be honest. We picked everything apart. Fairness, limits, what either of us could handle. My brain went straight to engineering mode. Logic trees, cause and effect analysis, every scenario mapped out. I needed to understand all the variables, and in the end, we decided to try it. It happened, and nothing was the same afterward. Julian hated it. I didn't see it right away, but looking back, it's painfully obvious. I'd been selfish, chasing an experience I didn't even know I wanted until I'd had it. He got nothing from it except the agony of watching me. He could have refused, but he didn't. Later, he confessed he never really agreed. He just stepped back and let me decide. After that, something fractured between us. We never managed to fix it. That night, when we got home, the gulf between us felt impossible to cross. I wanted to hold him, to soothe him, but anger, his and mine, stopped me cold. The argument that followed was brutal. He walked out of the bedroom, then out of the house. I didn't see him for 3 days. I called and texted, begged him to come back, but I had no idea where he'd gone. In the end, he did come back. He'd spent several days lost in a haze of drinking and late nights with friends, but when he returned, something fundamental between us had shifted. It felt like there was always an unseen presence hovering whenever we were together, a quiet, oppressive ghost I couldn't chase away. I knew I was treading on fragile ground, so I held my tongue and let things pass, hoping silence would keep the peace. Gradually, life slipped back into a rhythm that resembled normal. For his birthday, I booked a hotel room, determined to make the evening feel special for him. I think he appreciated it. But I was walking on eggshells, terrified that the wrong word or memory might crack the fragile calm we'd built. Up until Halloween, it almost felt like we were finding our way back to each other. Every year, we had a ritual, taking the kids trick-or-treating with the neighbors near his parents' house. They lived in Palatine, in a neighborhood famous for its Halloween crowds. People drove from other towns just to be part of it. By comparison, our own neighborhood barely acknowledged the holiday. After the candy hunt, the kids always spent the night at their grandparents', giddy and sugar high because no one there ever said no. That gave us a rare night of freedom. Sometimes we'd go to a party at the Russian division, sometimes to one of Julian's friends. But that particular year, things were different. Julian was away on business, handling financing for some television project, and he'd be in Los Angeles over Halloween. I remember sitting there, wondering what I was supposed to do with myself. The kids were happy with their grandparents. I was alone. And then I made a reckless decision, one of those choices you can never fully undo. I put on a costume and went out to a club. Halloween is huge in the nightlife world, even bigger than New Year's Eve, and I told myself Julian would never find out. I convinced myself that one night of escape wouldn't hurt anyone. Looking back, I can hardly believe how naive I was. Things between Julian and me had been slowly improving, yet I still chased the adrenaline I'd found in those places before. I convinced myself it wasn't about love or betrayal. I just wanted to escape. I believed I could keep both lives separate, so I kept going back. For a while, it worked. Every few months, I'd slip out alone, careful to maintain the illusion of stability at home. Julian seemed secure, and no one seemed hurt. But of course, nothing stays hidden forever. Eventually, everything unraveled. Renee paused then, lifting her glass and taking a slow sip. When she looked up again, the 3 women at the table were silent, their eyes fixed on her face, waiting. One night, Renee went on. Julian was in Milwaukee for a golf tournament and stayed overnight. I went out partying like I always did, and that's when it happened. That night, there was another couple at the club, people I barely knew, more acquaintances than friends. But they recognized me, and they knew Julian. When they saw me wandering the club, their shock was unmistakable. Naturally, they told him. He didn't confront me right away. By the time I realized he knew, he'd been home from Milwaukee for nearly a week. He said little, just hinted that he had things to handle. Later, I found out he'd hired a private investigator. The PI dug into club records, filed affidavits, even managed to get some of the people I'd been spending time with to testify. The last time I saw Dan and Sandy, the couple who'd seen me that night, was completely by chance. I ran into them at a TGI Fridays, of all places. I was meeting someone. They were sitting at the bar watching hockey. We ended up talking, and they told me how badly I'd hurt Julian. They said they'd tried to warn me before, tried to explain what real balance in a relationship looked like, that it only works when both people give equally, forgive equally. But that balance had never existed for us. I had never thought about it that way. I'd always assumed that if Julian didn't like going out, that was his issue, not mine. I never stopped to consider what my choices meant for us as a couple. My therapist later pointed out that I had always known, deep down, that what I was doing was wrong. Even if I pretended not to care about Julian's feelings, I couldn't deny the truth to myself. I simply refused to admit it. Renee's voice started to tremble then, her words faltering, vowels stretching awkwardly as her carefully polished American accent slipped. When it all exploded, she whispered. Julian came home one day and started throwing everything he owned into boxes. He left for Minneapolis that same night. He was humiliated, and so was his family. They were well known in Chicago. He didn't see another way forward. He took a teaching job as a business professor at the University of Minnesota, and he took the kids with him. His family had powerful lawyers, and they made sure everything landed in his favor. And me? I stayed behind, still going to the same club. She gave a bitter laugh. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even fun anymore. I see my kids 1 weekend a month during school breaks and for 6 weeks in the summer. It's not much, but I take what I can get. We talk online a lot. Skype calls, video chats. It's more than I deserve. The table fell silent. The weight of her confession hung heavy in the air. Finally, Renee whispered, "I miss the life we had. We were a family." "I'm so sorry," Beatrice said softly, her voice thick with sincerity. She reached out, resting her hand gently over Renee's. Renee squeezed Beatrice's arm, a faint, sad smile tugging at her lips. "It's okay. I made my choices. We all do. You just have to lie in the bed you've made, and eventually, you figure out how to move forward. One day, I will." Up until then, life had been nothing more than easy nights and fleeting romances with handsome strangers. The words were tossed out half-jokingly, a false bravado that somehow eased the tension in the air. After a beat of silence, Renee shifted uncomfortably, her voice soft when she finally spoke. "Want to hear something odd? Even though we split up, we still see each other now and then. When he's back in town, he calls, and usually, well, we end up at his hotel." It hadn't started that way, but over time it became, strangely, routine. He'd even ask if I still performed at the clubs, and I admitted I sang occasionally. He wanted to know what I'd been doing, not out of mockery, but genuine curiosity. And honestly, ladies, if I could get him to come with me just one more time, I'd make sure he left happier than he's ever been. A wistful laugh slipped from her lips. "Wishful thinking, huh? I just want him beside me again. It wasn't the clubs that tore us apart. It was me. My behavior there. I went too far. I shattered his trust. If I hadn't ruined it all—" Her words faded, weighted with regret. She gave a small shrug, muttering something under her breath. Beatrice blinked. "What was that?" "A Finnish saying," Renee explained quietly. "Roughly means a poke in the eye to anyone clinging to the past." Gabriel, sensing her mood, jumped in smoothly. "Another drink, maybe?" she suggested. "I'll check the coffee," Margot offered, standing up. She gathered the coffee service and hummed softly as she slipped into the kitchen. Gabrielle leaned closer to Renee, voice low. "Do you think she's ever going to tell us everything?" "The whole story?" Renee murmured. "I honestly don't know." Beatrice frowned. "Wait, there's a story?" "That's what I've been wondering," Gabrielle admitted quietly. "We've only ever gotten scraps, small hints she's dropped. None of us know the full picture." "She's got this way of gently shutting people down," Gabrielle added. "The sweetest little don't ask you'll ever hear." "What do you actually know?" Beatrice pressed. "There was some long affair," Gabrielle said after a pause. "Eventually it all came out. It ended badly. That's really all we know." "Well, that's close enough," a voice said behind them. They turned to find Margot returning with the steaming coffee pot. Gabrielle's eyes went wide. Renee stared at her hands. "Cozy little scene we've got here," Margot remarked, her voice kind, but carrying an edge that silenced the room. The others busied themselves with their cups, avoiding her gaze. "So," Beatrice asked carefully, twisting in her chair, "what's your story, Margot?" "My story?" she echoed, voice low, almost contemplative. "Yes, I think it's time." She set the pot down, moving slowly as she sank into her seat. "I've never shared the whole thing, just fragments, bits I felt safe giving away. But maybe this is the moment. They say telling the truth can free you." She offered Beatrice a faint smile. "So, yes, I'll tell it." Her gaze swept to Gabrielle and Renee. "And the two of you, who never dared to ask, you can listen too." Gabrielle and Renee traded a guilty glance. Gabrielle gave a sheepish grin, like a kid caught sneaking candy. Renee returned it with a faint, almost apologetic smile as she poured herself more coffee. "Ready?" Margot asked, folding her hands. "Good. Let me tell you about Randall, my Randall. God, he meant everything to me." She drew a slow, steady breath. "I met him in 1975. He'd just come back from serving at the U.S. Embassy in Cambodia. He was a Marine. When Phnom Penh fell to the Khmer Rouge, they evacuated everyone." She noticed their blank stares and gave a little laugh. "Forget the history lesson. What matters is, he was young and he was beautiful. He came home with his friend Ronnie Cordell. I knew Ronnie from high school. Soccer star, everybody loved him. Over there, Ronnie and Randall had grown close. When they came back on leave, they showed up together. We crossed paths at a dance. Well, more like a disco. It was the 70s after all. I never really cared for that scene, but my friends loved it. Bee Gees, Donna Summer, that was the soundtrack of those nights. At the time, I was working as a nurse in Champaign-Urbana. I remember everything about the night I met him. What we wore, the song playing. Love to Love You Baby by Donna Summer. He had on jeans, boots, a plaid shirt. I wore a yellow sundress. I can still see him now, beer in hand, the most striking man I'd ever seen. Ronnie introduced us. I was so nervous I barely managed a word. Randall, kind as ever, rescued me by asking me to dance. It was magic. He was magic. In that moment, I realized I'd been waiting for him my whole life. That very night, I knew I'd marry him. Her smile softened. We went on 4 dates, and we didn't even sleep together. Thank you. Not long afterward, he shipped out again, called back to active duty. Letters arrived daily, without fail, and whenever he found a phone, he called. Each leave brought him straight home without hesitation. His assignment was in Georgia, working security at a military post. By the 4th leave, he proposed. I barely let him finish the question before I said yes. A year later, he left the military, moved to Urbana so we could finally share a home, and I moved in with him. Back then, women from families like mine didn't do that. My mother reminded me every chance she got. But my feelings for him drowned out every warning. We married the following year, and for me it was bliss. The wedding itself, the single best day of my life. None of the extravagant productions people stage now. Ours was intimate, close friends, quiet celebration, simple beauty. The weather was perfect, a soft balance, neither hot nor cold. No drunken uncles, no family drama, just a night that felt easy and right. And the wedding night? Lord, that man understood love. I wasn't exactly naive. The 70s weren't an age of restraint. The 60s had already burned the bras and broken the rules. People were free, curious, daring. I'd had my share of experiences, enough to recognize the difference between a man pretending confidence and one who truly possessed it. And believe me, the pretenders are the worst. But Randall, he knew exactly what he was doing, and why. Even now, I can't fully explain why we waited. Maybe it was his sense of chivalry, misplaced, perhaps, or my own wish to hold on to at least one tradition my parents lived by, if only with the man I truly loved. Funny, looking at young people now, jumping into bed before vows. I wonder if maybe they've got it right. At least they know if they fit before committing forever. Still, what mattered is this. Randall was everything. Loving, confident, funny, clever, gentle when needed, unbending when it counted. He was perfect for me. We started out in a downtown apartment. Randall took a job managing the building, what folks today might call a property manager. He did it all: repairs, paperwork, showing units to new tenants. Those years glowed, golden days when it felt like nothing could touch us. Randall's family was small, just a brother in Idaho we visited now and then. Mine was my mom and two sisters. My father had passed from heart failure in '72. Randall's parents had died in a plane crash back in '68. Even so, we were happy. We saved every penny we could and eventually bought a house, generous by today's standards, and life felt solid. I worked at a hospital for an oncologist while Randall threw himself into maintaining our home. 3 years into the marriage, I got pregnant. Our firstborn was Ezra, my sweet Bonnie boy, though he'd roll his eyes at the nickname. 18 months later came Ellie, and 2 years after that, our youngest, Cameron. You can see them in the pictures on the mantel. The women turned toward the framed photographs, children caught at every stage of growing up, grinning in front of landmarks like the Grand Canyon and the Golden Gate Bridge. Gabrielle and Renee had noticed the frames earlier, but hadn't asked whose faces they were. Now they knew, Margot's family. She pointed to one, Randall flanked by the 2 boys, and took a slow sip of her hot chocolate. Randall had been a tall man, about 6'2". His hair thinned over the years, but he never resorted to that sad comb-over. He kept it cropped short. His sons inherited his height. You can see it in the photo with the Statue of Liberty towering behind them. All 3 shared those piercing blue eyes, and that grin, wide and goofy, gave away his sense of humor. In that picture, he's making bunny ears behind the boys' heads, and they clearly have no idea. We were travelers through and through. That was our shared passion, across the US, across the world, Egypt, Asia, Europe. London stole both our hearts. She paused, gaze drifting off, caught in some distant memory. He was good to me, she whispered. And I was good to him. We just understood each other. It felt like destiny. He gave me what I needed. I gave him what he needed. Together, we built a life. He ended up buying the building he managed, then expanded. 2 apartment complexes, 3 office buildings, a handful of parking lots, and 4 duplexes. By the time we parted ways, we'd built something substantial. 8 years in, we upgraded to a larger house. Indoor pool, pool house, the works. Our 4th of July parties became legendary. The whole town talked about them. As the kids grew older, I left nursing and stepped into politics. Randall cheered me on, even financed my first city council campaign. Before long, I was running for mayor, and winning, truly winning. Those were the glory years. It felt like nothing was impossible. Silence followed. Margot sat still, a faint frown crossing her face. Renee and Gabrielle shifted uncomfortably. Beatrice leaned forward, listening intently. "That was Randall," Margot said at last. "He was my everything." That was the thing about Damien. There was simply no neat way to put him into words. Margot's gaze darted nervously around the circle of women, measuring their expressions, unsure if voicing the truth about him was a mistake. But then again, she thought, she had already waded this deep into confession. There was no turning back now. They had laid bare their secrets. Hers would be no different. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself, and began. "Damien," she said, "was everything Randall was not. Or maybe it was clearer to say, Randall was the precise inverse of Damien in every conceivable way. Where Randall was reliable, even-keeled, anchored to the ground, Damien was restless, forever moving, like smoke you couldn't hold in your hands. Randall exuded a quiet permanence. Damien recoiled from permanence as if it were something toxic. Randall thought things through before acting. Damien never thought twice. He followed every impulse, every whim, and never paused to consider what might come after. Randall's humor was understated, dry. Damien found absurdity everywhere and laughed at all of it, mocking everything in sight. Randall's achievements came from years of deliberate labor. Damien, by contrast, stumbled into triumph overnight, only to lose it again just as fast. He could burn through thousands one day and be broke the next. "You get what I mean," Margot murmured, glancing from face to face. "He wasn't exactly dangerous, not in the traditional sense. More like a boy who refused to grow up. But he was magnetic, and for reasons I still can't explain, I couldn't seem to stay away." She admitted she had known Damien long before Randall ever entered the picture. Their brief affair burned hot and fast, 3 or 4 chaotic months that left her exhilarated and unsatisfied in equal measure. Damien wasn't simply a wanderer, he was reckless to the bone. His attention strayed, his hands strayed, and whatever moral compass he had was faint at best. After 2 days in his company, Margot often craved the calm of adult conversation. And yet, there was something fragile in him, something bird-like and broken, that made you want to shield him, coax him toward laughter, keep him safe. By the time Randall appeared in her life, Damien had already drifted out of sight for months. Meeting Randall, she knew immediately what he was, her partner in every sense, her soul's match. But Damien? Damien was chaos wrapped in charm, impossible to banish completely. He'd vanish without warning, only to resurface months later, as though no time at all had passed. They stole hours together whenever they could. Margot admitted she had never learned to resist him. Even after she married Randall, Damien lingered at the edges of her life like a haunting melody. She never doubted where her loyalty belonged. Randall was home, her solid ground. Damien was something else entirely, a dangerous indulgence, a secret vice she couldn't quite quit. He knew it too. He never asked for permanence, never offered it. Still, after some long absence, 8 months in Paris, for instance, Damien would call, they'd meet for coffee, and by evening they'd be orbiting one another again, as if pulled by gravity neither could deny. "You mean you were sleeping with him?" Gabrielle interjected sharply. Margot, usually the calmest among them, hesitated only a beat before she nodded. The faint triumph in Gabrielle's tone was unmistakable. Margot's admission made her seem less untouchable, more human. Margot exhaled slowly. "If by that you mean intimacy, yes," she said evenly. Damien had a kind of imagination I'd never seen before. Randall wasn't boring, not at all. But Damien was unpredictable. With him, I never knew what was coming next. That cycle stretched on for years. Damien drifted in and out of her life like a second husband no one else knew about. Each time he reappeared, he brought stories, outrageous adventures, confessions about lovers in foreign cities. He never lied about being unfaithful. And yet, without fail, he would touch her cheek, look her straight in the eye and whisper, "None of them are you, Margot." She would laugh at his audacity and kiss him back. It didn't bother her. He wasn't hers to keep, and she wasn't his. She had Randall. That was her real life. Damien was comfort of another kind, weightless, undemanding, uncomplicated. That's what it felt like, she said quietly. Comfort. He even gave her a ring once, plain but inscribed inside. Always there, waiting. For Damien, that was practically sentimental. She wore it on her right hand, the same finger as her wedding band. A foolish gesture, she admitted now. Foolish? Gabriel scoffed. Try outrageous. Wearing his token? That's bold, Margot. Margot didn't flinch. She met Gabriel's eyes, her voice calm but firm. You're right. I shouldn't have worn it. I knew what it represented. I shouldn't have even allowed myself to think of it. Back then, she confessed, she had felt untouchable. She had everything she'd ever wanted, a loving husband, a beautiful family, and a lover who fed a selfish craving she refused to name. It was arrogance, pure and simple. She thanked fate that Randall never learned the truth. The room was hushed, the weight of her confession sinking in. The other women sat silently, absorbing the enormity of her betrayal, the years it had spanned. Their own missteps suddenly seemed small beside Margot's carefully concealed duplicity. It wasn't weakness, Margot said finally, her voice softer now. It was deliberate. Every time Damien came back into town, we made sure to see each other, sometimes at his apartment. Sometimes, if Randall was traveling for work in Chicago, Damien would slip in through the back entrance to the pool room at our house. I never let him into the main rooms. That space belonged to Randall and me, not him. She gave a short, bitter laugh. The strangest part? I never felt guilty. Damien lived in an entirely separate world from my life with Randall and the kids. It was like I put the two lives in different boxes in my mind. After a while, the separation felt normal. Randall never suffered for it. Being around Damien felt effortless, like bumping into someone you've jogged with a dozen times before. I didn't overthink it. He was easy, familiar, like slipping on old sneakers or returning to a favorite hairdresser. But we did have fun. And from those moments, I picked up lessons I'll carry into my time with Randall. Some things we experimented with pushed me far enough to know where my lines were drawn. I won't go into specifics. Others might be more willing to share than I am. She glanced toward Renee, who didn't flinch. Personally, I think a woman should preserve some mystery. But I will say this outright. Bondage isn't for me. Nor are the insults or the name-calling meant to demean. When I'm there, I want to be treated as an equal, not someone kneeling, waiting for orders. And when Damien once suggested bringing in another man, I threw both of them out immediately. He vanished after that, nearly a year gone. I had standards, or at least I thought I did. Her voice softened. Truth is, if you get away with something long enough, you stop asking yourself if it's wrong. You stop thinking about what it does to everyone else. Eventually, it just folds into your daily life. It stops feeling illicit. You keep it hidden, but you don't examine why you're hiding it. It becomes routine. For me, life was straightforward. A reliable government job, a husband I adored, a love I believed unshakable, and off to the side a bit of secret excitement with an old friend who, I told myself, didn't jeopardize any of it, or so I convinced myself. Politics, though. Politics is peculiar. When the chance arose, I was ready. I was a Republican back when the party still claimed to represent more than corporate greed, blind faith, and double standards. My family had roots in the community. We owned land, volunteered, stayed visible. Our name carried weight. So when the knock finally came, it wasn't exactly a surprise. I'd already been serving on the city council, improving Urbana's schools, building credibility. When the local party approached me about running, I didn't hesitate. Randall was overjoyed, and I felt both proud and humbled. We decided together it was worth it. A chance to serve, to shape something lasting for our children, even if they weren't our only motivation. From that point on, we threw ourselves into the campaign. Randall and the party raised funds, and we hustled hard. My days were a blur of handshakes and baby kissing, sometimes jokingly mixing up the two. Gabrielle laughed softly at the bad joke, while Renee's expression stayed flat. Beatrice, though, hung on every syllable. The work was brutal. Late nights, constant decisions I shouldn't have been making alone. We spent heavily on flyers, events, ads, endless canvassing. We organized potlucks, $100 a plate dinners. I showed up everywhere, soup kitchens, food drives, community fairs, anywhere I could lend a hand. It drained me, but it mattered. Midway through, Damien resurfaced, back from Hong Kong with new equipment for some firm. Not every late night was about the campaign. Some were stolen hours at his motel room or pool house. Even so, I tried to keep Randall close, to make sure he felt cared for. What I didn't expect was how ruthless the opposition would be. They wanted the mayor's seat badly, and they weren't shy about tearing me apart to get it. I had no idea they were digging into my past. Being white shielded me somewhat, except for Damien, but by then he felt like background noise, like furniture. Nobody knew about him. We never talked about it, except for that one incident with the third man. There wasn't much for anyone to uncover. Still, they kept digging, and when they couldn't find proof, they pressed harder. That's when it all unraveled. I won the election. But right after being sworn in, the paper published an exposé questioning my morals. If she'd betray her husband, what might she do in office? The headline gutted me. They had photos, edited, but unmistakably us. I couldn't deny a thing. My career ended before it truly began. I resigned immediately. The council scrambled to name a replacement. Everything dissolved into chaos, but even that wasn't the worst part. Randall was destroyed. I saw it in him the moment I walked through the door after the article dropped. His face looked hollowed out. He asked if it was true, and I couldn't meet his eyes, not without blinking. And that single blink was enough. He knew. I stammered excuses, tried to minimize it. I told him he was everything, my king, hoping it would soften the blow. Gabrielle and Renee exchanged glances. Only I would call the collapse of my marriage sublime. In my panic, I said the most idiotic thing imaginable. I asked, in all our years together, have you ever once doubted that I supported you completely? It was the dumbest question I've ever asked. Randall broke even more. I braced for yelling, for things breaking, maybe even a slap. I would have stood there and taken it, but he didn't do any of that. He never deserved the weight of what I placed on him. From the very beginning, I should have known better. He stood there, frozen in place, his entire frame shaking. Tears carved wet trails down his face. My first instinct was the same one I'd had for years. Run to him, wrap him up in my arms, and pretend I could mend the pieces I'd shattered. I had done it before, over and over, during every hardship of our marriage. But this time was different. This time, he recoiled at the thought of my touch. The moment he pulled away, the truth landed with a chill so sharp it stole my breath. He didn't want me near him. No closeness, no comfort. That rejection was a deeper wound than anything else I'd felt. I already knew how much harm I had caused, but standing in front of him like that, seeing the devastation in his eyes, made the weight of it unbearable. Without a word, he turned and walked up the stairs. I chased after him, pleading through sobs, swearing that I loved him and only him, that the affair, absurd and unforgivable as it was, had somehow made me realize that love even more. Margot paused in her telling, glancing toward the circle of women around her. She raised her eyebrows and offered a bitter smile, one laced with self-mockery. Yes, that look seemed to say. I really did try to turn 30 years of betrayal into some twisted proof of devotion. I imagine all of you, she went on, voice low but steady, have said something equally foolish when your secrets finally spilled out. That frantic scramble to keep everything from falling apart, it drives you to grasp at any words, no matter how ridiculous. I begged, I wept, I promised anything, If only it could undo the wreckage. Her gaze lowered, her tone softening into something almost confessional. And yet, how often do we swear, "I'll do anything to fix this," only to realize we can't name a single thing that would make it right? I remember when Deanna told Ryan the same line. He asked her, "Anything? Like what?" She couldn't answer. I thought I could. I was wrong. Randall never yelled, never threw accusations. He didn't even argue. He just began packing a bag. Years of military life had made him efficient. Soldiers know how to disappear fast. Then, without glancing back, he walked out. I collapsed in the bedroom doorway, crying so hard I could barely breathe, reaching for his leg as he passed. He didn't stop. I couldn't tell who was crying harder, him or me. And then, in a heartbeat, he was gone. "I don't need to tell you how hollow I felt," Margot said, voice nearly breaking. "You already know." After that, she made one call, to resign. No grand explanation, just muttered apologies that were met with curt silence and the words, "Resignation accepted." She asked them to inform the press, and they did. For days afterward, she barely left the house. Her children came, one by one. Cameron was first, stopping briefly in Chicago on his way somewhere else. He didn't push for answers, didn't mention the affair. He only asked if she was all right, though she couldn't bring herself to answer honestly. Later that week, Ellie and Ezra arrived too. By then, the whispers had started. No one outside the family knew the full scope yet, the years, the details, but the shame was already spreading. At first, the kids were gentle, tentative in their comfort. But as more of the truth leaked out, their softness hardened. They'd been staying with Randall. He must have told them everything, how long it had gone on, who it was with. He'd even tracked Damien down. After a few threatening visits from men who didn't mess around, Damien had spilled every sordid detail and then vanished, fleeing as far as he could, because that was who Damien was, always looking out for himself. So Randall knew it all, or at least everything Damien confessed. Margot tried to reach him in every way she could think of. Calls, letters, emails, even texts, though she barely knew how to send them back then. No reply. When she called his office, his assistant Tracy would only say, "He's away indefinitely," and nothing more. No hint of where he was staying. A hotel, maybe. One of their other apartments. She had no idea. Margot drew a sharp breath before continuing. The children hadn't heard from him either. Ezra guessed he was somewhere trying to heal. Ellie and Cameron thought he'd come back once the shock wore off, but the days kept passing. No word. The room had gone still. No one shifted in their chairs. No one dared breathe too loud. Even the clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, filling the silence. Margot forced a smile, but her eyes betrayed the storm raging inside her. "Randall died 4 days before our 30th anniversary," she whispered. 5 days after he found out what I'd done. Beatrice let out a soft exhale. Gabrielle and Renee exchanged stunned looks. "I'm so sorry, Margot," Gabrielle murmured. "Yes, I'm sorry for your loss," Renee added quietly. Beatrice said nothing. She only covered her mouth with one trembling hand, tears shimmering at the corners of her eyes. Randall's body was found in a Marriott hotel room 4 days after Cameron last spoke to him. He had been dead for 2 days. The coroner called it a massive heart attack, the kind triggered by overwhelming stress. His heart, they said, had swollen, misfired, and stopped. Instant, clinical, final. But Margot knew better. "He died of a broken heart," she said, "and I'm the one who broke it." Her voice cracked on the words. She turned toward the coffee station, fumbling for a napkin to hide her tears. When she finally looked up again, none of the women were staring at her. Their eyes had dropped in quiet respect. "It's fine," she murmured, forcing composure. "I'm just being dramatic, emotional." To her surprise, it was Beatrice, the youngest, the quietest, who spoke first. Her voice was gentle, raw. "Margot, that's not foolish. It's human. If you've never shared this before, maybe this is the moment. It sounds like you've been carrying it alone for too long. Honestly, I think we all have. Gabrielle and Renee exchanged startled glances. This girl's compassion felt disarming, almost too sincere. 4 days, Margot whispered again. 4 days before our 30th anniversary. We were planning a huge celebration. It was supposed to honor both my mayoral victory and 30 years of marriage. Her voice faded into silence. No one spoke. The weight of the room deepened until it felt suffocating. It happened only 48 hours before his birthday. "Oh my God," whispered Gabrielle. Renee's voice followed, barely audible. "This is unreal." Beatrice didn't say a word. She stood frozen, wide-eyed and silent. Then Margot spoke. "I killed him." She believed it with absolute certainty. The shock of her actions had taken his life. There were no words the others could summon to refute her. To deny it outright would have rung hollow. Finally, Gabrielle tried to break the silence. "Margot, there's no way you can know that for sure. If his heart was already weak, anything could have pushed it over the edge." Margot's tired eyes met hers. "Maybe so, but I know what I saw. He was stunned because of me. And that killed him. You can argue over the details, but the truth is still there, and I have to carry it." She inhaled deeply, her voice steady but fragile. "What I did, and how long I kept doing it, didn't just break my marriage. It destroyed the man I loved more than anyone else in this world. It ended a good man's life. That's something I wake up with every single day." The room fell silent. The heaviness of her words clung to the air until Margot began speaking again. "After it happened, I couldn't stay in Champaign-Urbana. Everyone knew. Everyone judged. My own sisters barely looked at me anymore. Maybe I'd get a phone call on my birthday or a Christmas card, never a Thanksgiving invite. Eventually, I packed what I could, left everything else behind, and came here. I bought this apartment." Her tone shifted slightly as she continued. "When Randall died, after the divorce, really, I ended up with everything. The company, the buildings, everything we built together. I was rich, at least on paper. But the kids," her voice faltered, "they deserved better than me. I'd betrayed their father for years. I couldn't take it all and live with myself, so I kept only what I needed, 2 million, and gave them the rest. It was theirs by right, their father's legacy." Neither Gabrielle nor Renee had known this detail before. Margot had given away roughly $13 million to her children, keeping only enough to ensure she'd never struggle. Quietly, she had even created a college trust for Renee's children in Randall's name. They wouldn't discover it until adulthood, but she had ensured none of them would ever shoulder student debt. "Cameron tolerates me for the kids' sake," Margot went on. "I spoil my grandkids every chance I get, though they never come here. I think Cameron worries I'm a bad influence, and honestly, he's probably right." She paused before continuing. "Ellie and I talk now and then. She visits sometimes. She's still single, though I think there's someone new in her life. She's mentioned him a couple of times. We're not close like we were. And Ezra—" Margot's voice softened. "Ezra told me at Randall's funeral that I was dead to him. He's kept that promise. I hear from others that he's married now, has 2 kids. I've never met them. I doubt I ever will." Her eyes shimmered as she reached the heart of it. "My deepest regret isn't that we're estranged. It's that Randall died without ever knowing the truth, that he was my knight in shining armor. He never knew how fiercely I loved him, or that my love for him was real. Damien meant nothing by comparison, just a distraction, an escape I couldn't quit. Randall was my everything, and I lost him. This," she gestured to the women sitting around her, "is all I have left. Don't misunderstand," she added. "I am grateful for you all, truly. But if it came down to choosing between this and Randall—" She let out a brittle, humorless laugh. "I think you know which way I'd lean." Gabrielle chuckled softly. Renee managed a faint smile. Even Beatrice gave a rueful laugh. They understood. Any of them might have chosen the same. Margot straightened, a trace of wryness in her voice. "The only reason I'm sharing this," she said, glancing at Beatrice but motioning toward Gabrielle and Renee, is because these two wouldn't quit pestering me. Gabrielle and Renee gasped in mock offense, which earned a small smirk from Margot. Also, Damien passed away last week. A friend back in Urbana called to tell me. I thought about going to the funeral, but in the end, number Damien already cost me too much. I won't give him another moment. She took a sip of cocoa, grimaced at its chill, and set the cup aside. I want to honor Randall, not Damien, she finished. Skipping the funeral is the only way I know how. Margot exhaled, the confession finally spent. That's it, she said at last. That's my truth. Now, Beatrice, do you see why we're here? We know more than you think. We're not excusing what you've done. You know it's wrong. But we're not here to condemn you either. We're offering a safe space, support, advice, a circle where you don't have to defend yourself every 5 seconds. Renee already said you can stay with her for now. Maybe create some distance from… what's his name again? Julian, Beatrice muttered. Right. Distance yourself from Julian. Because if this keeps going, it will destroy you. A little escape from guilt is one thing, but carry on down that road and it only gets worse. People always find out. And when they do, you lose everything. Look at us. Look at what we've been through. We're trying to keep you from the same fate. Margot leaned forward slightly. So, Beatrice, do you want our help? Because if you do, all you'll find here is understanding. A sharp edge of humor. A satisfying splash of scandal. We'll stay right here, rooting for you. Not to pick a fight with your ex. No, that's not our mission. But to help you sweep up the debris and carve out a new beginning. Sound fair? Beatrice's eyes flickered toward Margot, wet with unshed tears, then darted briefly to Gabrielle and Renee before finding Margot again. Her voice quivered as she murmured, That actually sounds nice. I need nice. I need something to look forward to. Some hope. And maybe people I can trust. Thank you. For staying. For helping. Her last words fractured in her throat, and Margot reached over, brushing the back of Beatrice's hand with her own in a soft, steady gesture. It won't be easy, darling, but you won't have to face it by yourself anymore. Turning toward Renee, she added, Go help her get started with the packing. Before anyone could move, Margot stood and slipped into the kitchen. Moments later she returned, a bottle of Wallerstein Prairie Fumé cradled in her hands. Here, she said, placing it into Renee's grasp. You're both going to need this before the night's over, maybe more than one bottle. My treat. Believe it or not, Wisconsin made this, and it's won 2 gold medals. Who knew they could do wine right? Renee's smile was faint but genuine as she nodded. The others rose, gathering their coats and bags. Thank you, Margot, Renee said quietly as they drifted toward the door. Same time next week? I'll be here, Margot replied, helping them slide into their heavy winter coats, steeling themselves against the bitter air outside. At the doorway, she hugged each of them quickly, whispered a farewell, and watched them disappear into the darkness beyond the threshold. The silence that followed settled heavy in the hallway. Foolish old woman, she muttered to herself, voice barely above a breath. He's gone, buried deep, not coming back. Still, her eyes lifted upward, hesitant and aching. But I wish it weren't true, she whispered. I love you, Randall. I always will. Exhaling sharply, she frowned at herself, turned toward the living room, and began clearing away the forgotten coffee cups.